This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this segment of Behind the Headlines, Maura and I are going to go from hospitals to townships and just continue to talk about budget problems. But of course, Maura, just recently in Pennsylvania, we've had one of the premier events in Pennsylvania politics and government, and that is the Township Association, Township Supervisors annual conference.
And their 93rd year, I understand.
93 years.
Yeah.
And
someone who wasn't around.
We were not around for the first one.
And our guest was not here either, 93 years ago.
Well, we're fortunate to have with us Dave Sanko, who is the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Well, we're very happy to have you. This is a big event, not just for your association, but for Pennsylvania government. You bring in township supervisors from all across Pennsylvania into the Hershey Conference Center?
Into the Hershey Conference Center, we bring about 4,000 people.
For a week?
Into town for 4 days, Sunday through Wednesday. A couple days there. A lot of educational programs, seminars, many of which were standing room only. Some general sessions, a lot of good speakers: governor, lieutenant governor, auditor general, the Speaker of the House, the leader of the Senate. Just phenomenal presentations, and we had a legislative reception with over 100 legislators visiting as well.
So it's a chance not only for them to network, but it's a chance for them to learn all the new things that are out there. And you're bringing in speakers and the people who are leading the way in innovations for township governments across the country.
Yeah, I think it's learning on both sides. It's learning for our members to get to hear from the leaders in Harrisburg, many of whom are new in their roles. But it's also an opportunity for the folks in Harrisburg to get to hear from local elected officials who are serving the same constituents, living the same problems, and in many instances being innovative, and those innovators who are crafting common sense solutions that wouldn't hurt to surface in Harrisburg every now and then.
And so what are your township supervisors saying right now? What are their biggest concerns?
Well, I think there was a lot of discussion about the natural gas fees and the impact fee versus the severance tax. There was obviously a lot of discussion on the transportation funding, which was a huge addition to local governments from the result of the last couple of years, but also looking towards federal funding solution. There was some discussion of unfunded mandates, and then a little bit of discussion on pensions, municipal pensions. But the larger point there was that it's not the big problem that for many of our members that are being portrayed in some of the cities.
Well, going back to talk about the new governor, Governor Wolf, and his plan is to replace the impact fee that the gas companies pay to the townships and the local governments where they operate, to replace that with a severance tax. There's both good and bad in that for the state and for local governments, isn't there, Dave? Could you sort of give us a chart on that, the pros and cons?
Sure. Well, the impact fee, when it was crafted as a result of the Marcellus Shale Commission that I had the opportunity to serve on, was actually a really innovative model in that it didn't, nowhere else in the country was there an impact fee. Where money was being able to be directed to local communities and those communities that are impacted. That fee has generated in excess of $600 million over the last several years into local communities that have helped fund public safety initiatives, fund transportation initiatives, fund water and sewer initiatives, planning initiatives, all kinds of things that impacts that were caused by the industry, which is in addition to being a positive economic engine, did bring some changes to communities. So we were very concerned about the prospects of losing that funding. And the way Act 13 was written, if there were ever to be a severance tax introduced, the impact fee would be eliminated and would go away. So you'd go from having an ability to have that funding to not. So the good news is that in Governor Wolf's proposal, he wants to maintain that level of funding, so that was in the impact fee to be carried over into a severance tax model, which is good news for local governments. It could be bad news for local governments in that they're depending on how it's written. I mean, it could be if it's the first dollars in, that's wonderful. If it's the if we got to find the leftovers after we hit the first billion for education, probably not so good. And the other thing that is of concern is that the current proposal from the governor caps that funding at $225 million. Now that's the largest amount that was paid in a single year, and it would guarantee that level regardless of the whether drilling went up or down. But obviously, as we move into the future, the likelihood of drilling expanding versus declining is greater. So we're concerned. We think that money ought to be able to float with the market and with the amount of drilling that's going on. So if drilling goes up, the available funding goes up. If drilling goes down, the available funding goes down. We're not looking for guarantees in bad times, but we would like to have the opportunity to have the benefit in the good times.
So it sounds like the devil's going to be in the detail when we finally see what the proposal actually looks like, correct?
As is often the case in the writing of legislation.
Yeah, so you're going to be staying right on top of this for your members.
We will continue to monitor. It's a big deal for.
So it sounds like it can go a couple different ways. So you're going to have to keep an eye on it.
There are a lot of options. Yeah, we have to watch.
Pension reform, you said, was being discussed at your conference, and you said that the House Majority Leader, Mike Turzai, was there, and the Auditor General, Eugene D. Pasquale, was there. And they both have things to say about pension reform, too. What are some of the things, I believe you have a little bit more information from behind the headlines that you can share with us about pension reform in Pennsylvania, Dave?
Well, I think everybody is well familiar with the headlines of the pension distress at the state level between the state employees and state teachers in excess of $50 billion with the B dollars shortfall. Municipal pension shortfall is about $7.5 billion. $6.5 billion of that is just the city of Philadelphia. So as you look at the large number of municipal pension funds, 90% of them are either completely funded or only minimally distressed, and only 10%. Actually, only 2% are severely distressed, but 10% are funded at below a 70% level. So that's really not a lot of communities. It's a big problem for those communities that have the shortfall, but it's not a big problem for most communities. And one of the concerns that our members had was the idea of a suggestion of consolidating all the pension funds into a single pension fund. Well, we don't have to look too awful far to see how that story ends. We've seen two other ones that have huge shortfalls, and the idea of taking the positive fund balances from the 90% of the communities that have done it right and using their revenues to help balance the budgets in the 10% of the communities that didn't get it right doesn't seem to be a good idea.
I understand the governor came to your conference, is that correct?
He did.
And how did that go, and how's your relationship with the new administration?
I think we are optimistic. We're still learning, as everyone is. The governor has been very open and willing to talk, doing things differently than prior governors, but still open to those suggestions. And seemingly to date, we'll see as we move forward. We seem to have good partnerships.
That's great.
One of the major problems across America has affected Pennsylvania as well, and that is the decline in volunteerism. And we find here in Pennsylvania we rely heavily on volunteer firefighters. I believe this was one of the topics that was explored at your conference too, Dave. And I believe your association has a very good relationship with the State Fire Commissioner, Tim Soloway. Did you folks come up with some ideas on how to deal with or approach this shortage, this looming shortage of volunteer firefighters in Pennsylvania?
Sure. Well, I think there's been a lot of focus on it for a number of years. And as you know, I in a prior life had been the state director of emergency management, so have a little bit of background in this. Townships are on the front line of emergency response and for providing public safety, including fire, police, and EMS. Firefighters are volunteers in most of our communities, and if we were to lose the volunteer firefighters and go to a paid fire service, it would cost $6 billion. That's a lot of property tax increases to have to pay for that.
Jeez.
So there's all kinds of incentives for all kinds of reasons for everybody to try and incentivize the growing of the volunteer base for those in the fire services. People that are in fire services are a special breed of people. When a building's on fire, most of us run out.
Yeah.
They run in.
Right.
You need folks who are going to do that. We need to try and incentivize it. There was a Senate resolution 10 years ago that put out some plans for ways to do that. We're continuing to push forward with that. We've talked about partnering with the fire commissioner and the PEMA director and traveling around Pennsylvania and doing a road show, if you will, in communities, talking about the importance, the important integration between local governments and emergency services and the public.
Well, what are some of the incentives that are, just a handful of those that have been proposed?
Well, I think the idea of college tuition for volunteer fighters, reimbursements, property tax relief for volunteer firefighters at the federal level. We're trying to, and we'll be going to Washington in very shortly to talk with members of Congress about trying to incentivize volunteer fire services and getting a tax deduction on your federal income tax, something that is currently not there.
Wow, those would be great incentives.
Just one last thing in the last minute that we have, Dave. I just read a little report in The Economist of how Japan is trying to address some of the needs of their local government. So many people have left the countryside and have gone into the cities, but they still have attachments to the countryside and their local government that they may have left. And so you can take a deduction, take some of your tax return that's due to the federal government, and you can designate it for your local government. And then you can designate up to something like 7% of the amount of money that you owe to Tokyo goes to your local government instead. Wouldn't that be nice to have something like that for townships at the state level?
I think from a funding perspective that would be attractive, but if we were to go with the surveys in Pennsylvania and see that, almost 2/3 of Pennsylvanians trust their local government more as the most trust level of government, they do that voluntarily. 25% trust the state and 10% trust Washington the most. I'm not sure who those folks are.
Dave, thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you again next week on Behind the Headlines.